this was the only trailer. I know this is like editing trailer is fucking stupid.
Blizzard has cancelled numerous games throughout its history.
Like, it's fucking stupid. Like, it's easy, but it's fucking stupid and takes so fucking long. Anyway, let's get back to the World of Warcraft world. Like, okay, so are you fucking joking? Thank you.
Blizzard has cancelled numerous games throughout its history, literally dozens of projects dedicated to the Warcraft universe. Some were axed during conceptual stages, while others were very close to release, yet never saw the light of day. At one point, developers even considered creating World of Warcraft 2.0, which seems particularly surprising in hindsight. So, today, I want to discuss all the cancelled projects set within the Warcraft universe. First off, let's establish that cancelling projects isn't inherently bad, and I don't think Blizzard should be criticized for it. Any major company constantly experiments, develops concepts, and invests in expanding its popular universes. What looks good on paper doesn't always translate well in practice. So, let's begin our journey through the cancelled Warcraft projects with Warcraft Legends. One could say this game became an early prototype for the well-known Warcraft 3. At the time, Blizzard's popularity was surging, and the second Warcraft game had been a success. The developers tried to venture into something new. In Warcraft Legends, instead of building bases, managing economies, and training workers like in traditional real-time strategy games, the player would focus entirely on a hero and a small army. The camera was intended to be fixed behind the hero in a third-person perspective, base building would be absent, and characters would command small combat squads. With limited information available, my best guess is the overall concept would have resembled the Rexxar campaign from Warcraft 3. In that campaign, you also don't build structures or mine gold. Instead, you control a few heroes and a handful of additional units, completing various quests and objectives. Ultimately, the game was cancelled, and disagreements emerged within the development team. We don't have this information directly from Blizzard, unfortunately, but from other sources, including later journalistic investigations. This means the data might be skewed, or even somewhat biased. Based on these reports, Blizzard was hesitant to take risks, and leaned towards developing Warcraft 3 instead of Warcraft Legends. One of the key ideological drivers behind Warcraft Legends was Mike O'Brien, a prominent figure who had worked on many important company projects. Reportedly, several employees, including figures like Chris Metzen, asked a company co-founder to remove Mike O'Brien from the project. O'Brien allegedly perceived this as a profound betrayal. Not long after, he and several other employees made the decision to leave Blizzard. Together, they went on to found their own gaming company, ArenaNet, which would later become renowned for its popular MMO, Guild Wars. While O'Brien's removal from the Warcraft Legends project was a significant catalyst, the reasons for these talented individuals' departure were likely deeper, with each having accumulated various grievances over time. However, that's a story for another discussion.
Okay, it's just one thing. Can you believe that, like, there's a mobile game, can you believe that this game exists? Like, just saying, Warcraft Rumble. Like, it's a mobile game with basically like it's basically Clash of Titans or whatever. Raid Shadow Legends. Oh, no, it's the other one with the turrets, right? Can you believe that this exists, like Warcraft Rumble? Actually, it doesn't seem to be that bad, but it's just like, god damn. I mean, it makes money and like, damn. Anyway, let's keep on going.
In any case, the Warcraft Legends project was ultimately cancelled, its core ideas beginning to evolve into what would become Warcraft 3. The design philosophy shifted significantly away from a purely hero-centric approach, transforming into a more traditional real-time strategy game where the hero remained important, but wasn't always the sole decisive factor. For instance, among the interesting concepts explored was a hero's leadership stat. A higher characteristic would allow a squad to contain more units. You've likely heard of Warcraft Adventures, Lord of the Clans if you follow Blizzard, and Warcraft at all. I often mention this game in my own videos, especially in the context of Thrall, so we won't dwell on it too long. Its genre, like Warcraft Legends, was unusual for Blizzard, reflecting a desire by some developers to try something new.
Oh yeah, it was on CD and like basically Zelda, like the people behind Nintendo actually did games like this, and it was like a catastrophe. It was just awful.
The game was intended to tell the story of Thrall, the future war chief of the Horde, and a profoundly important character for the entire universe. Players would have learned about the plight of the orcs after the Second War, when many were imprisoned in internment camps. We would have experienced Thrall's escape from the captivity of Blackmoor, his overseer, and even met Alexstrasza, whom the orcs had once enslaved to use her children as weapons against the Alliance. The story would have culminated in Blackmoor's demise. Unfortunately, the developers ultimately decided the game was in
Fortunately. You meant fortunately.
poor condition and shouldn't be released, fearing it could harm Blizzard's reputation. However, in my opinion, nothing truly terrible would have happened. In Warcraft 3, we meet Thrall as a seemingly random character who has already managed to lead a portion of the orcs. Warcraft Adventures would have provided crucial and, in my view, quite interesting backstory. Even now, looking back, the game reveals fascinating little details that fill in gaps in the lore. For instance, Durotan's axe, which was originally intended to be Thrall's weapon, was inexplicably replaced with another in Warcraft 3. We would have encountered a host of intriguing characters, such as Drekthar, a prominent figure of the Frostwolf clan, and Zul'jin, who influenced the trolls joining the orcs during the Second War. We might even have learned more about the fate of the fallen kingdom of Alterac. This kingdom was devastated for its betrayal in the Second War, and it featured in the background of Warcraft Adventures.
Let me just check real quick if everything is going on. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Even Blackmoor himself, the game's main antagonist, was originally from
Okay. Yeah, no, it will be a fucking shame to fucking have a stream that like has no sound to it. Anyway.
Alterac in this storyline, not Lordaeron as in the modern lore. Overall, reviewing gameplay footages and contemporary discussions, I don't see much negative public reaction. On the contrary, many fans would likely have been thrilled if the game had been released in its time, but alas, what's done is done. Warcraft strategy games were, without a doubt, legendary. Developers naturally considered a continuation. However, by the time these thoughts solidified, World of Warcraft already existed. This raised crucial questions. Was a new RTS truly worth the effort? Would the resulting product be as popular relative to the company's size? And if they did make it, what would it be about? Before World of Warcraft, developers could gradually unveil bits of lore and the game world to players. But now, the world was already explored from Darnassus to Booty Bay. Developers also began to suspect that the RTS genre itself.
So I'll just like to tell you the story. Like, I grew up with World of Warcraft as my childhood game, and you see this image. This for me is actual peace. You know, like this for me is actual, like, I don't know why, this atmosphere, this aura when I was a child. When I was just like playing before discovering what the fuck the world is all about, you know, I got the chance to actually get into World of Warcraft, play and just like discover these at the time, and even now, like the graphics didn't change since 20 years. This fucking place. And I get to tell you that this is a lifesaver when it comes to discover later on life what the fuck is life about. I will tell you quite kindly that like life is not for me, and life is just especially with new generation, is not for a lot of people. And to be fair, I'm so glad, I'm so thankful of Blizzard. For you, it's probably your own game, you know, but like that I got to experience this and walk these planes, you know, rather than fucking like be stuck in my home and never experience what fantasy is like, what dreaming is like, and what could have been, what should have been, what could be maybe, or some philosophical nonsense that I won't explain, right? But this was for me. This was for me. My savior, my beacon of hope, and as well as my as my like place of serenity when I was a children. I just wanted to point this out because just watching this images just like just calms me down and just like brings me just this hope, and I just needed to say to share it. Anyway.
Wasn't as popular as it had been in the late 90s or early 2000s. Based on very indirect and fleeting mentions, it seems developers genuinely took some steps towards creating Warcraft 4 around 2007-2008. They even hinted that after the release of StarCraft 2, they might potentially focus on the next strategy installment. But, as we all know, no Warcraft 4 ever materialized. If it was indeed being developed internally, it likely didn't progress beyond basic foundational work. Perhaps it was quietly shelved as priorities shifted toward more profitable live service projects like World of Warcraft. There were some hopes that the success of Warcraft 3, Reforged might spur developers to further pursue strategy games. However, Reforged was not well received. Periodically, headlines emerge suggesting that the Blizzard-Microsoft merger might enable the former to begin developing StarCraft 3 and Warcraft 4. But these are speculations, and realistically, it currently seems that if continuations for these two strategy games do appear, it certainly won't be anytime soon, and it's not even a given that they'll ever be released, unfortunately. Okay, if Warcraft 4 seemed like a very remote and forgotten concept, let's discuss an equally intriguing idea. World of Warcraft 2. Generally, sequels to existing MMO games aren't entirely unique. For instance, there's Guild Wars, which received a second installment almost 7 years after its release. This partly happened because the developers wanted to introduce features and innovations they couldn't implement on the original game's engine. Then there's Lineage, where the first and second parts differ radically. We can also recall the Ancient EverQuest, MapleStory, and a host of other projects. In 2014,
but the reality is that like the engine that Blizzard actually worked on is well, from my understanding, is a really malleable engine, meaning that like World of Warcraft looked good back in the day, and the style that they adopted is something that does not ages. It just stays the way it is, and because of that, a lot of like things that like were bound to technology back then actually were saved just because they did so many effort for World of Warcraft to look like World of Warcraft. And this is what's really fascinating, where it's like, you don't understand, but like as a retail player, I play on a game engine that is 20 years old, and it doesn't fucking frustrates me. It doesn't fucking like it doesn't create like, it's not a problem to me and to many players, even people playing World of Warcraft Classic. Now try to fucking like get some people into some what is called retro gaming, like, or like no new, not new gaming, but like old gaming, right? And because like WoW is not retro gaming, but still. And you'll notice that like a lot of games, they just have engines and choices of styles that make them age really poorly compared to WoW. And WoW was able to actually like continue with their style and actually like make it look better and better slowly without like touching too much, without making like the first iteration, the first zones, the first iterations look completely awful.
A gaming publication managed to interview Tom Chilton, who was World of Warcraft's game director at the time. The publication asked,
like, for example, so this is, it writes, so this is like an Unreal Engine,
if the developer
Unreal Engine Orgrimmar, right? Do you see how like compared to like WoW, it's like dry and really sad in a way, And well, the thing is, like, try to update this because it's not like cartoonish enough, it's not like colorful enough, it's not fantasy enough, right? Try to fucking update this for like 10 years. And you'll notice that, like, it will fucking like make people mad because just because it is too aggressive, but not I don't know, not just like accessible enough, you know? I don't know which word to say, but like this is too aggressive as a style. It does not allow for you to fucking work on it for 10 years and for it to look good. While as this kind of like really friendly and really like adorable in a way style that like allows it, you know?
Developers had ever considered creating World of Warcraft 2, to which Tom Chilton definitively replied, yes, absolutely. Moreover, he revealed they had been discussing it internally for over 10 years. However, at that point, the prospect seemed very
You can literally see it here, where like the color, the pastels, like the everything is like not as like fucking like aggressive, and it allows for more creativity, but it allows also for like the fact that it doesn't age, you know, that you can actually like manipulate and slowly upgrade your game engine to a certain point where like it becomes like so much like really more beautiful or really more interesting.
distant, and a whole range of problems would need to be solved. For example, what would they do with the first game? Continue it or not? Should the two games coexist, or would they be entirely separate products? 10 years have passed since that conversation. Has any clarity emerged? Well, it's become clear that there is no World of Warcraft 2, and it's unlikely to appear in the next 5 years. Though speculations about it periodically arise in the community, and fans sometimes create mock-ups of what Warcraft might look like with new graphics. Occasionally, developers also add fuel to the fire. For example, in late 2024, Ion Hazikostas, the game's current game director, stated that a theoretical hypothetical World of Warcraft 2 is possible. However, he emphasized that they are currently more than satisfied with the original Warcraft, and there is no immediate need for a sequel. I also want to mention Peggle, World of Warcraft Edition. This wasn't a cancelled project, but rather a closed and forgotten one. For context, Peggle is a casual puzzle game. There even used to be an add-on that brought the game into Warcraft. It gained a bit of popularity for a while, especially among players looking for a break between raids. Then, the developers of Peggle and Blizzard decided to collaborate, resulting in Peggle, World of Warcraft Edition. Essentially, it was the same casual game, simply reskinned with Warcraft themes. Instead of generic nature backdrops, you might see levels featuring Onyxia, Stormwind, or Ragnaros. In 2011, this curious crossover was discontinued and forgotten to history.
This
In
is interesting.
2021, it became known that Blizzard was developing at least 2 mobile games. The first project appears to have been Warcraft Rumble, which was released relatively recently. However, the second project was likely cancelled. More clarity emerged the following year. This second project was reportedly similar to Pokemon Go, but instead of catching Pokemon, one would presumably collect Warcraft pets and interact with the Warcraft universe setting. What's currently happening with the project isn't entirely clear. There were persistent rumors of its cancellation circulating among fans and
Remember the fucking like Pokemon Go craze? Everyone fucking lost their fucking mind in with that site for like 2 weeks. And then nothing changed and everyone went back inside.
industry insiders, while others suggested it was still quietly in development as of 2022. Regardless, the game has not been released, and it's uncertain if it ever will be, making it one of the many Blizzard experiments that may...
Like, that's what I meant. So this is not an upgraded basically screenshot of World of Warcraft from 20 years ago. Do you understand, like, compared to what I was talking to you about, like, graphics and stuff, what the fuck do you need to upgrade here? Like, there is no need for, like, more realistic, like, yeah, it could be more detailed, but, like, it is standard, it is, like, at least to me, it is, there's nothing to change. There's nothing to change. Like, this is good enough for, like, any type of consumer, this is good enough for any type of player. And this is what a lot of games didn't took the time to actually like invest time in when creating their engine, leading them to actually having games that like do not feel great to play because the graphics kind of feel off, you know, even if it's well done, even if it's well made. And I'll give you another example. StarCraft 2. Play StarCraft 2 right now, you'll notice that like it doesn't have this vibe of like old game. It has this vibe of like game polished, game well thought, and game like finished, like when it comes to graphics, when it comes to gameplay, when it comes to everything.
They never see the light of day. We recently learned about 3 more cancelled Warcraft games, largely thanks to Jason Schreier. Unlike past projects where we had official mentions or even leaked builds, information on these 3 relies on anonymous sources, making the details quite vague. The first project, codenamed Neptune, was arguably one of the most ambitious undertakings. It was being developed in close cooperation with NetEase, Blizzard's Chinese game localization partner, with whom Blizzard had also successfully collaborated on Diablo Immortal. A dedicated team of over 100 employees was working on this title, and it was envisioned as a large-scale mobile MMO game. The events of this game were planned to unfold in the distant past of Warcraft lore, though precisely when remains unclear. Given the rich and detailed history of Azeroth, I'd venture a theory that it might have been set around the time of the First War, a pivotal era that shaped much of the world's destiny. Several reasons led to Neptune's cancellation. Firstly, Blizzard and NetEase reportedly disagreed on working conditions. This friction later escalated, causing Blizzard's games to temporarily disappear from the Chinese market entirely, a situation many will recall. The second reason was the project's quality. Apparently, developers couldn't polish Neptune to their desired standard. The second project, codenamed Avalon, was the strangest. Rumors of this unannounced game date back to 2013, when Blizzard began hiring for an undisclosed project. It was to be produced by Mike Booth, who previously worked at Valve, including on Left 4 Dead. 2 years later, quite abruptly, Booth left Blizzard, stating his project wasn't a good fit for the company, and so Avalon vanished. Little is known about it. From very brief descriptions, the game was said to resemble Dragon Quest Builders. This suggests a Minecraft-like experience, but with a more focused and structured storyline, a variety of quests, and the need to assist NPCs and defend towns from threats. Avalon would have similarly taken place within the rich world of Azeroth. Reportedly, the game was even quite fun and interesting during its development phase.
I feel that's like World of Warcraft came to the point where like all of these projects you can just like implement them into the game itself, taking the time. Like, and you can see that with player housing, right? So why bother doing a game when you can invest the same time and implement it to the main game, which will lead to more sales, which will lead to more players and stuff. But I think that like overall, but this was back in the day when this wasn't an option. Like nowadays, this is why you will not see any other project around like World of Warcraft other than the continuation, thankfully.
Finally, the last project, Andromeda, remains almost entirely unknown to the public. It was purportedly similar to God of War in terms of gameplay and style, but with Thrall as the main protagonist. Perhaps it was envisioned as a new interpretation or spiritual successor to the cancelled Warcraft adventures, albeit set in a different time and place within the Warcraft universe. The game was cancelled due to its team leader, Alex Afrasiabi, who was fired in 2020 and whose problematic conduct became a central part of the 2021 Blizzard scandal. Blizzard attempted to find a new director, but failed, leading to the game's termination. In essence, Thrall unluckily missed out on 2 separate dedicated games about him. Currently, these are all the known cancelled Warcraft projects. It's entirely possible there are more unannounced projects, including mobile ones, within our beloved universe that we simply don't know about yet. But as we've seen, the Warcraft franchise alone has had a number of interesting projects that, for better or worse, were abandoned.
That was an interesting, really interesting take. Thank you so much, Nico Rar, for the video. This was actually really interesting to me. I think that like there was like other projects, like he only talked about like WoW projects. but there was like one project that everyone like really lost their mind and was supposed to be like this huge project. It was called Project Titan, and it was supposed to be an MMO just like World of Warcraft, but in the future, so StarCraft, in the kind of StarCraft universe. But it never come to life, and you can understand why, with all many fucking struggles like it is to manage such a rich and a great franchise. So yeah.